The parking garage beneath Hartwell Automotive's headquarters smelled like poured concrete and money. It was the kind of money that didn't announce itself. No neon signs, no chrome fixtures. Just 40,000 square feet of polished floor, climate-controlled air, and silence so complete that every sound carried the hum of ventilation ducts, the distant click of an elevator, the precise heel strike of Elena Ward's shoes as she crossed the level. 6:30 in the morning. 3 days into what her chief of communications had quietly termed the situation. The Ferrari sat at the far end of the executive bay, cordoned off by a strip of orange tape that looked absurd against its crimson paint. Two of the garage's in-house engineers, both with graduate degrees, both drawing six-figure salaries, stood beside it with the defeated posture of men who had run out of ideas and were now waiting for someone else to have one. Dario Fensky, the older of the two, had his hands in his jacket pockets. He'd stopped touching the car 12 hours ago. Same as yesterday, he said when Elena approached. No fault codes. Battery reads full charge. The ECU is responsive. Everything says it should start. Nothing says why it doesn't. Elena did not look at him when he spoke. She was looking at the car. It was a 1987 Ferrari Testarossa, and it had belonged to her father before it belonged to her. He had bought it new, driven it exactly 4 times, then garaged it for 22 years because it was too beautiful to use. She'd inherited it 8 years ago along with the company, the debt load, and the particular loneliness of being the only person in the room who remembered what the founder actually wanted. She had driven it once herself. The morning of her first board presentation, she'd needed something to remind her of what all of it was for. She hadn't driven it since, but she had kept it here, on this level, in this bay, and every morning when she walked past it, she remembered. Now it sat dead, and she had a $90 million partnership presentation in 72 hours, and the Testarossa was supposed to be centerpiece of the event restored, running, the living symbol of continuity between her father's vision and the new electric performance line they were about to launch. Find someone, she said. We've called every specialist in the metropolitan area. Find someone else. She was already walking toward the elevator. Behind her, Dario exchanged a look with his colleague. That exchange, that particular combination of helplessness and low-level resentment, was still on Dario's face 40 minutes later, when he met the man from the staffing agency in the lobby. Marcus Hale arrived at 7:15 with a canvas tool bag over one shoulder and a 7-year-old girl holding his other hand. The lobby attendant, a young man named Seth, looked at the child with visible uncertainty. She goes where I go, Marcus said. That's not negotiable. Seth looked at his screen, then at the child, then at Marcus. Mr. Fensky said, she sits quietly. She won't touch anything. Marcus adjusted the strap on his bag. Is there a problem? There wasn't, technically. The agency had sent him on short notice. And short notice in this case meant Dario Fensky had called 3 other shops before this one and received politely worded variations of "we can't help you" from all of them. By the time Marcus's name came up, Dario was no longer in a position to negotiate details. Lily, the 7-year-old, was wearing a yellow raincoat over her school clothes and carrying a stuffed rabbit named Governor that had lost one eye sometime in the previous winter. She looked at the lobby with the calm, attentive expression of a child who had learned to observe adult spaces without participating in them. She was used to going where her father went. Dario met them at the elevator, walked them down to the garage level, and spent the ride explaining the situation in the efficient, technical language of someone who no longer cared about making things sound better than they were. Dead battery ruled out. ECU, diagnostic clean. Fuel system pressure normal. Ignition signal present, but not completing. Marcus listened. He didn't ask questions. Lily held Governor and watched the floor numbers change. The garage doors opened, and they stepped out onto polished concrete. It was Lily who saw the Ferrari first. Dad, she said quietly, pointing. I see it. She didn't say anything else. She had learned, over 7 years of weekend mornings in her father's small shop in Millbrook, that cars were serious business when they were not working, and that her job in those moments was to find a good spot and wait. She found a good spot, a low concrete pillar near the wall, clean and dry, and sat down with Governor in her lap and a picture book she'd pulled from the outer pocket of her father's bag. Marcus walked toward the Ferrari. He stopped 4 feet from it. He stood there. This was the moment Elena Ward arrived. She had come back for her forgotten tablet. Her assistant had sent 3 messages, and she came through the stairwell door at a pace that suggested she had stopped giving herself permission to slow down sometime years ago. She was 41, dressed in the kind of understated suit that costs more than a semester of tuition, and she carried the particular authority of someone who had never once been uncertain about which room she was supposed to walk into. She saw the man immediately. Battered canvas bag. Work jacket with a grease stain on the left cuff that washing hadn't fully removed. Dark hair, a few days past needing a cut. Standing too close to her car, with the focused stillness of someone who had not yet been told where the line was. Her eyes moved from him to the child sitting against the wall, then back to him. "Who are you?" she said. "Marcus Hale. The agency sent me." "The agency sent you." She repeated it without inflection. "And you brought a child to my parking garage." "My daughter. She's not in the way." Elena looked at the girl, who was reading her book, and appeared to be completely indifferent to the conversation. Then she looked back at Marcus, at his jacket, at the bag, at the particular quality of his stillness, which was the stillness of someone who had been assessed and dismissed before, and had learned not to respond to it. "Don't touch my Ferrari," she said. It was not a request. It was the kind of sentence that came from a place deep inside, where control and grief were stored together, and neither one had a clean name. Marcus met her eyes. He nodded once. Then Elena's tablet buzzed 3 times in quick succession, and she turned and walked back to the stairwell, and the door swung shut behind her with a soft mechanical click. Dario, standing slightly to the side, let out a slow breath. Marcus looked at the Ferrari for another 10 seconds. Then he set down his bag, crouched, and listened. "What are you doing?" Dario asked. "Listening. We've run every diagnostic." "I know." Marcus did not look up. "Let me listen." Dario crossed his arms. Behind him, his colleague, a younger engineer named Paul, had taken out his phone but seemed to feel embarrassed about it and put it away again. Marcus placed one hand flat on the hood. Not pressing. Just contact. The way a doctor lays a hand on a patient's back, not to push, but to feel. He closed his eyes for a moment. Then he opened them and walked to the driver's side door. "The key is in the ignition," Dario said. "We've tried." "I know." Marcus opened the door. He did not get in. He leaned in and turned the key to the accessory position. He listened to the relay click sequence. 1, 2, a pause. 3. He stood back up. He walked around the front of the car to the passenger side and crouched beside the wheel well. He looked at something there for a long time. "Do you have a flashlight?" he said. Paul handed one over. Marcus shone it into the wheel well, angling it precisely. Then he stood, walked back to his bag, and removed a small device, a multimeter, old but well-maintained, and a single flathead screwdriver with electrical tape wrapped around the handle. He went back to the wheel well. Dario followed him around. "What are you looking at?" "Ground strap. We checked the main one, not the secondary." Marcus was already working. His movements were very small. Precise. The way you move, when you know exactly what you're touching, and why. On this generation, there's a secondary ground strap that runs from the chassis to the passenger side firewall. It's not in the service manual. It was added late in production on a subset of units that went through a specific quality check at the factory. Dario was quiet. "The strap looks fine from the outside," Marcus continued. "But if the crimp fitting corrodes internally, not visibly, internally it'll pass a resistance test with leads on the terminals, because you're not accounting for the microgap inside the crimp. The computer sees ground. The ignition system sees ground. But the coil doesn't get enough current at the precise moment of firing to actually light." He made a small adjustment with the screwdriver. Then he clipped the multimeter leads. He read the number. He looked at it for a moment. Then he stood, walked to the driver's side again, leaned in, and turned the key. The engine turned over once. Then the Ferrari roared to life. It did not cough or hesitate. It caught cleanly and settled into the low, authoritative idle that these engines were designed to produce a sound like controlled thunder in a very small room. The sound filled the garage. Dario started. Paul made a sound that was not quite a word. From her spot by the pillar, Lily looked up from her book. She looked at the Ferrari, then at her father, then went back to reading. Marcus turned the engine off. He stood up. He picked up his multimeter and his screwdriver and walked back to his bag and put them away. He zipped the bag closed. What just Dario started? Secondary ground crimp. It's failed. It'll need to be properly replaced, not just adjusted. I can do it this afternoon if you want. Or I can write up the spec and your team can handle it. Marcus slung the bag over his shoulder. Either way, she'll run for now. Don't take her on the highway until it's properly fixed. How did you know about the strap? Paul asked. That's not documented anywhere. Marcus looked at him. Something moved briefly in his expression, not quite emotion, but the ghost of it. I know, he said. He walked to the pillar. Lil, we're done here. Lily closed her book and tucked it into her coat pocket and stood up, and she took her father's hand, and they walked toward the elevator, and the garage was very quiet around them except for the faint ticking of a cooling engine that had been dead for 3 days and was now alive again. Elena Ward did not like information she couldn't categorize. She sat in her office on the 32nd floor with a view of the city that she had stopped seeing years ago, and she read the brief her assistant had assembled from the security log, the agency invoice, and the 2-paragraph conversation Dario Fensky had typed up with the careful neutrality of a man who was still trying to process what he'd seen. Marcus Hale, 36 years old, currently operating a single-bay repair shop in Millbrook, a suburb 40 minutes west of the city that was known primarily for its school district and its declining strip mall corridor. The agency had him on file as a freelance mechanic available for short-notice specialty work. No degree listed. No former employers of note. Specialty, European performance vehicles, pre-2000. Classic Italian particularly. She read that last line twice. There was a knock at the door. Her executive assistant, Priya, leaned in. Dario is asking whether you want to confirm the afternoon booking for Mr. Hale. The crimp fitting needs, yes, Elena said. Confirm it. Priya withdrew. Elena set the brief down and looked at the window she had stopped seeing. There was something she didn't have yet, some piece of information that would make the morning's events make sense in a way she could file away and stop thinking about. She was accustomed to having those pieces. She had built a career on assembling them quickly and completely. What she did not have was an explanation for how a mechanic from a single-bay shop in Millbrook had known about an undocumented ground strap on a production variant of a 1987 Ferrari Testarossa. She reached for her tablet and opened the company's internal archive. She started with the obvious searches. Nothing came back for Marcus Hale. She tried variants. Marcus Hale, nothing useful. She typed, Testarossa production variant ground strap QC subset. A single document came back, a technical addendum from 1987, written in a mix of English and Italian, filed as part of a historical acquisition of factory documentation that her father had apparently purchased from a collector in Modena sometime in the 90s. The document detailed a late-stage modification to units that had gone through a specific quality checkpoint at the Maranello facility. The secondary ground strap was mentioned in paragraph 4. She stared at the document. Her father had owned this documentation. He had known about the strap. He had, presumably, explained it to someone or shown it to someone at some point in the car's 37-year history. She closed the archive. Downstairs, in the parking garage, Lily Hale was sitting in the same spot by the concrete pillar. She had finished her book and was now drawing in a small notebook with a set of colored pencils she kept in her coat pocket. She was drawing the Ferrari. She drew it carefully, with the particular attention a child gives to something she finds genuinely beautiful, getting the proportion of the pop-up headlights slightly wrong, but capturing something true about the overall shape, the low aggression of it, the way it sat on the floor, as if it had no intention of being anywhere else. Marcus was on his back under the car, working on the ground strap replacement, and the only sounds were the occasional clink of tools and the scratch of colored pencils on paper. At 2:45, Elena Ward came down to the parking level alone. She did not announce herself. She stood at the edge of the bay and watched for a moment. Marcus was still under the car. She could see his legs, his work boots, the angle of his hips as he reached for something above him. The girl Lily noticed her first. She looked up from her drawing, with neither alarm nor warmth. She regarded Elena the way a child regards a bird that has landed nearby, with calm, uncategorizing attention. Then she looked back down at her drawing. Elena walked a few steps closer. She could see the notebook now. She could see the drawing. She stopped. The child had drawn her father's car, and somehow it was right. Not technically right, the proportions were slightly off, as they always are when hands are still learning, but right in the way that matters, in the way that says the person drawing actually looked and understood what they were seeing. Elena did not move for a moment. "That's very good," she said. Lily looked up. "Thank you. How old are you?" 7. "Do you draw often?" "Mostly cars," Lily said. "And some animals." "But mostly cars." Marcus had gone still under the Ferrari. He was listening. Elena looked at the drawing a moment longer. Then she looked at the pair of boots visible beyond the front wheel. "When will you be done?" she asked. 20 minutes, Marcus said. From somewhere in the mechanical darkness. She nodded, though he couldn't see it. She stood there for another few seconds. Then she turned and walked back to the elevator. And the door closed. Lily watched the elevator numbers above the door light up as it climbed 3, 12, 24, 32. She looked back down at her drawing. She added a small red smear of color pencil along the bottom of the car to get the right shade of the paint. The crimp fitting was replaced by 315. Marcus tested the repair with the engine, running for 12 minutes, long enough to confirm the ground connection held under thermal load. He shut it down, packed his tools, made a handwritten note of the repair specification, and left it folded on the driver's seat. He did not invoice the additional diagnostic time. He invoiced the labor and the part. He was in Millbrook by 4:30, with Lily in the passenger seat, eating crackers from a bag, and telling him about a problem she'd had with her drawing. She couldn't get the angle of the rear quarter panel right, and she wanted to know if he could hair. "Tomorrow," he said. "I'll bring the photographs." He had photographs of most of the cars he'd ever worked on. Lily used them to draw from. His shop, Hale Automotive, occupied a single bay in a light industrial building shared with a tile distributor and a custom woodworking operation. The sign was hand-painted. The equipment was old, but maintained with the same obsessive care he applied to everything mechanical. He dropped Lily with his neighbor, Patricia Oakes, who watched her on the evenings he had late jobs, and went back to the shop because he had a '94 Alfa Romeo in the bay that needed its cam timing checked. He worked until 8:30. Then he locked up and drove home. He made dinner. He helped Lily with 30 minutes of reading before bed. He sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and opened his laptop and stared at the screen for a while without typing anything. Then he opened a file he kept in a folder labeled Admin and looked at it. It was not an administrative document. It was a collection of notes, technical observations, dates, names, organized with the quiet thoroughness of someone who has been paying attention to something for a long time, waiting to understand what it means. He added a line. Secondary ground strap on the Testarossa failure pattern consistent with induced micro-corrosion, not consistent with age alone. Magnesium residue on crimp face. He looked at the line for a moment. Then he closed the file. 2 days later, he got a call from Dario Fensky. "The car did something again," Dario said. He sounded exhausted. "What did it do?" "Same symptoms. Wouldn't start this morning. We're back to square one." Marcus was quiet for a moment. He thought about the magnesium residue he'd noticed on the crimp face of the original fitting, a detail he'd noted without mentioning, because he hadn't been sure yet what it meant. Magnesium-based compounds were used in some battery electrolytes. They were also used in certain types of corrosion accelerants. Industrial chemicals. Primarily, available to people who knew where to look, who had access to the car overnight, he said. Dario paused. "I'd have to check the log." "Check the log," Marcus said, "and don't start it again until I get there." He arrived at 8. Lily was at school. He'd arranged for Patricia to collect her. He went straight to the car. He did not stop to speak to anyone. He examined the new crimp fitting he'd installed 2 days ago. He used his flashlight. He looked at it for a long time. Then he examined the area around it. What he found was small. A trace of powder, fine as flour, settled in a groove of the engine bay where it would not catch casual attention. He photographed it with his phone. He did not touch it. He stood up. The repair he'd done 2 days ago was fine. The fitting was intact, but something had been introduced into the cavity above the fitting, something that, given enough time and the right humidity conditions, would work its way down into the next mechanical joint. Not fast, over days or weeks, but persistently. He looked at the garage for a moment, the ceiling cameras, the access points, the keypad entry log panel on the wall. He walked to the driver's side and started the car. It started. Of course it did. The issue was upstream, and it hadn't progressed far enough yet. But it would. Someone wanted it to. He turned the engine off. He packed his tools. Dario was waiting by the pillar. It started, Dario said, surprised. Yes. Marcus picked up his bag. The repair I made is still holding. Then what was that? I'm not sure yet, Marcus said. I'd like to come back tomorrow. Check a few things. Dario looked at him. Do you need me to clear it with Miss Ward? That would be helpful, Marcus said. Elena Ward had not slept well in 11 days. This was not an unusual situation for her. She operated at the intersection of a company that needed constant forward momentum and a personal psychology that found rest expensive, but it was unusually pronounced. The $90 million partnership was not the only thing keeping her awake. It was the thing she was allowed to say was keeping her awake. The other things were older and had no clean names. She was sitting at the long table in her conference room at 6:45 in the morning, reviewing the demonstration timeline for the 3rd time, when Priya knocked and told her Marcus Hale was in the garage. He asked to be left alone with the car, Priya added. Dario wanted to know if that was acceptable. Elena looked at the timeline. At the Testarosa's place in its centerpiece, running demonstration, Heritage Series launch, 11 a.m. It's acceptable, she said. She went down at 7:30. Marcus was under the car again. She could hear the careful, methodical movement of tools, not rushed, not searching, but the deliberate sounds of someone who knew exactly where they were going and was being thorough because thoroughness mattered. She stood at a distance. After a while, he slid out from under the car. He sat up on the creeper, looked at the ceiling for a moment, then noticed her. He did not appear startled. Miss Ward, he said, what did you find? He stood. He wiped his hands on the cloth he kept tucked in his left back pocket. He looked at her with the expression of a man deciding how much to say, and to whom. I found something that suggests the car's problems aren't mechanical in origin, he said. Meaning what? Meaning the failures have been introduced. Someone with access to this vehicle and this garage has been introducing a corrosion compound into the engine bay at intervals. He paused. It's slow-acting, designed to look like age-related degradation. Elena's expression did not change. She had learned, over 20 years of leading a company, to receive bad information without visibly processing it. But her hands, which had been at her sides, moved. One reached for the lapel of her jacket and held it for a moment. You're certain, she said. I took photographs. I can give you the documentation. Who has access to this level? I was hoping you could tell me that. She looked at him. She was deciding something. Walk me through it, she said. He walked her through it. He was careful and specific without being dramatic. He showed her the photographs on his phone. He described the compound, its properties, the mechanism of what it would do over time. He explained that the secondary ground strap had been a natural first target. It was the most arcane weak point in this vehicle, and its failure would look exactly like age-related degradation to anyone who wasn't specifically looking for induced causes. Elena listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. If this continues, she said, and the car fails during the demonstration, the partnership falls through, Marcus said, or at minimum, takes significant damage. She looked at him. You know about the partnership. I know the demonstration is in 48 hours, he said. And I know what a $90 million deal failure looks like for a company this size. How do you know that? He met her eyes. It's a fairly small industry, he said, when you know where to listen. Something crossed her face. Not quite suspicion, more like the feeling of a door that almost opened. Stay close to the car, she said. I want you here for the demonstration. I'll need to make arrangements for my daughter. We'll cover that, she said. She turned and walked back toward the elevator. Marcus watched her go. He looked down at his phone, at the photograph of the powder residue. He looked at it for a long time. The archive room on the 28th floor was not a place Elena went often. It was maintained by a document services manager named Gareth, who took the job seriously and kept the humidity precisely regulated and had color-coded every box with a system only he fully understood. She went at 9 in the evening, when the floor was empty, with the keycard access that came with being the person whose name was on the building. She was looking for something specific. She found it in a box labeled HR Archive Engineering, 2014-2017. The folder was thin, 2 pages of intake documentation, a performance review marked exceptional, and a termination record from February 2017 with the reason coded as voluntary separation. Personal circumstances. The name on the folder was Marcus T. Hale. She sat with the folder in the regulated humidity air for a long time. He had been a senior design engineer. Hired in 2014 out of a position at an Italian manufacturer, she recognized a company that had consulted on several European performance vehicles of note, including a production run of Ferraris, in the mid to late 80s. He had worked on her company's heritage restoration program, the same program that had acquired the Modena documentation, including the factory addendum about the secondary ground strap. He had left in February 2017. His wife, her name was Claire. Elena found it in the emergency contact field, had died in January 2017. The paperwork said voluntary separation. The performance review, dated 4 months earlier, said exceptional in all categories. Unique depth of period vehicle knowledge, considered irreplaceable. Irreplaceable. And then gone. Elena closed the folder. She sat with the information. He had known about the strap because he had been the one who found the Modena documentation. He had understood it, in the deep, proprietary way you understand something when you have spent years in its specific vocabulary. And then his wife had died. And he had left. And no one apparently had gone after him. No one had called. No one had tracked the folder in the HR archive and thought, this person is irreplaceable and they are gone and we should understand why. She thought about Lily, sitting with her colored pencils, drawing the Ferrari. She thought about the way Marcus had said she goes where I go to the lobby attendant. With the particular flatness of someone who has made peace with fighting every small battle that needs fighting. She put the folder back in the box. She turned off the archive room light. The morning of the demonstration, Hartwell Automotive's main event space was on the ground level, a vast, glass-fronted showroom that opened onto a private courtyard where 3 vehicles were positioned for display. The new electric performance prototype, flanked by 2 heritage pieces. The Testarossa was at the center. The guest list was 40 people, a mix of the investment group's partners and several automotive press contacts who had been invited for the product announcement. They were arriving at 10:30. The demonstration began at 11. At 9:47, the prototype would not start. Marcus heard about it the way he heard about most things. The sound changed. He was in the garage below the showroom, doing a final check on the Testarossa, when the particular quality of voices above him shifted from professional calm to something with more edge in it. He took the service stairs. In the showroom, Elena was standing beside the prototype, a long, low electric vehicle in brushed graphite, with her arms at her sides and her face in the configuration of someone exercising maximum restraint. Her head of engineering, a man named Victor Slade, who had been with the company for 15 years, was crouched beside the car with his tablet. The drive system isn't initializing, Slade said. We had a full systems check at 8. Everything was green. And now, nothing. It's as if the initialization handshake never completed. Around them, Three junior engineers moved with the barely controlled urgency of people who understood the stakes and had not yet accepted that they were out of answers. Marcus walked into the space. Elena saw him before anyone else did. "Mr. Hale," she said, with something in her voice that was not quite relief but was adjacent to it. Slade stood and looked at him with the measured suspicion of a man who had earned his position over 15 years and was not accustomed to external interventions. "The consultant from the garage," Slade said. "What's the initialization failure present as?" Marcus asked him directly. Slade looked at him for a moment. Then, reading something in Elena's posture, he answered. "The system controller responds to diagnostic ping, but it won't complete the pre-drive check sequence. It's timing out before the battery management system handshake. When was the last time anyone accessed the control module bay?" Slade paused. "Yesterday afternoon. For the pre-demonstration validation." "Who did the validation?" Longer pause. "I assigned it to Renner." "Daniel Renner?" Marcus said. "The CFO?" The room went very quiet. Elena looked at Slade. "Renner doesn't do validation work. He asked to observe," Slade said slowly. "Said he wanted to be familiar with the technical process before the investor presentation." "I thought he stopped." "The control module bay," Marcus said. "Can you open it?" Slade opened it. Marcus looked inside. He spent 40 seconds looking. He did not touch anything. Then he stepped back. "There's a USB drive inserted in the secondary diagnostic port," he said. "Partially. Not fully seated, but partially. It's interrupting the handshake sequence." Everyone looked. It was there, barely visible, a small drive inserted at an angle that was neither fully in nor fully out. Slade reached for it. "Don't," Marcus said. "Photograph it first. Then remove it carefully. The logging port will have a timestamp of when it was inserted." His voice was entirely calm. The room was entirely quiet. Elena Ward was looking at Marcus Hale with an expression that had stopped being professional some time in the previous 30 seconds. Slade pulled the drive. The prototype initialized in 45 seconds. The pre-drive check completed. The drive system came online with the particular soft electronic chime that the development team had spent 3 months designing, and which sounded, in this context, almost ceremonial. The guests were arriving in 20 minutes. Elena walked Marcus to the service corridor. She closed the door. The sounds of the showroom preparation continued beyond it, the low professional murmur of people arranging displays, checking audio, moving chairs. "How long have you known?" she said. "I had a suspicion after the second Testarossa failure," he said. "I had a stronger suspicion when I found the residue. I didn't have a name until this morning." "What made you suspect Renner specifically?" "The access log," he said. "You gave me the access log 2 days ago, for the garage level. Renner was there at 11:40 p.m. 3 nights ago. He was there for 9 minutes. There's no legitimate reason for the CFO to be in a mechanical garage at 11:40 at night." "I gave you the access log," she said, "to help identify who had access to the garage." "I know. You didn't tell me what you found in it." He held her gaze for a moment. "I wanted to understand the full picture before I said anything I couldn't take back." She considered this. In her experience, people who withheld information did it for one of 2 reasons. They were protecting something, or they were building towards something. She was trying to determine which this was. "What does he gain?" she said. "If the demonstration fails, if the partnership falls through." "I don't know the details of your capital structure," Marcus said, "but a company that loses a $90 million partnership and fails to deliver its flagship launch will be significantly undervalued for a period of time. Someone positioned to acquire shares in that window, or to negotiate a buyout from a position of distress." "He's been talking to an acquisition group," Elena said slowly. "I've heard the name twice in the last month. I thought," she stopped. She had thought it was coincidence. She had thought, with the arrogance of someone who had rebuilt a struggling company into something worth fighting over, that the concept of a hostile internal arrangement was something that happened to other companies. "I need the log data," she said, "and the photographs, and whatever else you have. I'll send it to you in the next 10 minutes. She looked at him. Something had shifted in the way she was looking at him. Not the assessment of a potential threat or the dismissal of a service provider, but something more honest. "You came back," she said. "After the first repair. You didn't have to keep looking." "I noticed something that didn't fit," he said. "I don't do well with things that don't fit." "Is that why you left?" The corridor was quiet. The professional sounds beyond the door continued. Marcus looked at the floor for a moment, then at her. "My wife died," he said. "I needed to be somewhere I could be a father before I was anything else." Elena did not offer condolences. She had learned, at some point, that condolences offered years late and by a stranger were not comfort. They were a social reflex. She just looked at him. "The guests will be here in 18 minutes, she said. "The cars will be ready," he said. Daniel Renner was 53, silver-haired, and had been with Hartwell Automotive for 9 years. He had survived 2 ownership transitions, 4 CFO searches that ended with his retention, and a market downturn that had required the kind of financial restructuring that made enemies in every direction. He arrived at the demonstration at 10:28, looking relaxed. He was not relaxed for long. Elena had called her general counsel, her head of security, and through the general counsel, a contact at the Financial Crimes Division, all within the 40-minute window between Marcus's revelation and the guest's arrival. She had done it with the cold efficiency of someone who had prepared for this category of day, without knowing exactly when it would come. The investor presentation proceeded on schedule. The prototype ran. The Testarossa, for the first time in weeks, sat in the centerpiece position and looked exactly like what it was, a living connection between the company's past and its stated future. Elena spoke for 22 minutes. She was precise, warm, where warmth was appropriate, and entirely in command. Renner sat in the third row and smiled at the right moments. At 11:40, after the guests had moved to the courtyard for the vehicle demonstrations, Elena walked to where Renner was standing near the display table and spoke to him quietly. Her general counsel appeared at his other side. 2 members of the security team were visible at the corridor entrance. Whatever Renner said in the first 10 seconds of that conversation, Elena listened to without changing her expression. Then she said something. Then he stopped talking. Marcus watched this from near the Testarossa, where he was standing with his hand resting lightly on the car's roof, not leaning on it. Just the contact, the way he'd done with the hood on the first morning. Knowing where things are, Lily had arrived at 10 o'clock, delivered by Patricia Oakes, and was sitting on a low bench near the courtyard entrance with Governor and her notebook. She was drawing again. She was drawing the courtyard, the cars arranged in their formation, the guests moving between them. She was drawing Elena Ward. She hadn't meant to. She'd been drawing the cars, and Elena had walked through her field of view at the right moment, with the particular upright, forward-moving posture that Lily's hands apparently found interesting, and Lily had drawn her. Not a portrait, she was too small in the composition for that. But present, an investor named Howard Briggs, 70 years old, and wearing a hat that he'd owned for longer than most of the staff had been alive, wandered near Lily's bench and looked at the notebook over her shoulder. "That your dad's car?" he said, pointing at the Testarossa. "No," Lily said. "He fixed it, though." "That right?" "He fixes most things," she said, and went back to drawing. Inside, in the service corridor, Marcus and Elena were alone again. Renner was in a conference room on the 14th floor with the general counsel, waiting for a meeting he'd been told was a quick financial clarification. "How bad is it?" Elena said. "That depends on what he's been doing with the acquisition group," Marcus said. "The sabotage, the physical sabotage, I can document completely. The powder compound, the ground strap, the USB drive. The access logs tie him to all 3 access events. That's a criminal matter." He paused. "Whether there's a larger financial arrangement behind it, that's for your lawyers. They'll find it if it's there," Elena said. "They're good." She stood with her arms crossed, not defensively, but the way people cross their arms when they're thinking through a weight. "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" she said. "When you first suspected." Marcus was quiet for a moment. When he answered, he chose his words with the same care he applied to tools. "Because you'd told me not to touch your car," he said. And I was still figuring out if I'd been wrong to anyway. She looked at him. You weren't, she said. I know that now. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that settles after something has been said that needed to be said and has landed in the right place. I found your file, Elena said, in the archive, the HR record. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look pleased. You should have, he said. I'd have been disappointed if you hadn't. You left when you didn't have to. I left when I needed to. There's a difference, she said, between those things. Yes, he agreed. There is. She unfolded her arms. She turned and looked through the narrow service corridor window at the courtyard, where the demonstration was continuing, and Howard Briggs was now crouching beside the Testarossa with his hat still on, talking to Lily, who was showing him her drawing. I'd like to offer you your position back, Elena said. Director level. The Heritage Program has grown significantly since 2017. There's real work there. Marcus looked at the window too. He watched his daughter show her drawing to an old man in a hat. My daughter gets out of school at 2:45, he said. That can be accommodated. She has a medical insurance gap. Her previous coverage ended when I left the last position. That can be resolved immediately. I work best when I'm not managed, he said. I report findings. I don't attend status meetings. I'll put that in writing, Elena said. He looked at her then. You don't want to negotiate at all, do you? I negotiated a $90 million partnership, she said. I know when negotiation is appropriate. And when someone just needs to be told yes. Something happened in his face, small, controlled, but real. Not quite a smile, the shape of one. I'll need to keep the shop, he said. Millbrook. I'll need to keep it open. That's your business, not mine. Then yes, he said. I'll come back. 3 weeks later, the garage on the building's executive level had been upgraded not in any visually dramatic way, but in the particular ways that indicate a place is being taken seriously. A proper diagnostic station, updated lighting, a clear organizational logic to the tool storage that had been absent before. Marcus had done none of this himself. He'd submitted a list of equipment needs on his first official day, and the facilities manager had taken care of it. He had spent his first official day doing what he always did. Looking at the cars, one at a time. Learning what they needed. The Testarossa was in excellent health. He checked it every Tuesday and Thursday, which was more frequent than strictly necessary. But the Heritage Program's documentation was being updated for the first time in years, and accurate maintenance records required accurate maintenance intervals. He came in at 7. He left at 2:30. He collected Lily from school at 2:55. In the evenings, he kept the Millbrook shop open 3 days a week. The Alfa Romeo's cam timing had been sorted in the second week of October. The shop had 2 other regulars, a man named Bradford Eunice, who owned a 1969 Maserati and treated it as his primary relationship, and a woman named Donna Voss, who had inherited a Lancia Stratos from an uncle and had no idea what to do with it, but refused to sell it. He liked the shop. He liked the scale of it, one bay, one problem at a time. The clarity of a space where the question was always straightforward. What's wrong, and what does it need? Elena came to the garage on the last Thursday of October. She had not announced herself. She came down in the elevator at 11:15 in the morning, which Marcus noted because he'd learned the sound of the executive elevator arriving, and had learned, over 3 weeks, that 11:15 was not a time Elena Ward typically had free. She was wearing a coat she hadn't worn before, wool, long, the kind of coat for walking outside rather than crossing lobbies. She stopped at the entrance to the bay. Marcus was sitting on a low stool beside the Testarossa, with a factory photograph open on a tablet propped against the front wheel, and a magnifying glass in his hand, comparing a detail of the engine bay to the image. Lily was at the table in the corner. She was here today because her school had a half day and Patricia had a dentist appointment. She was drawing. She had been drawing the garage, working on a composition that showed the Testarossa from the front at a low angle, with the overhead lights making long shapes across the floor. Lily saw Elena first. "Hi," she said. "Hello, Lily." Elena looked at the drawing. She walked closer. Lily held it up to show her. It was better than the first one. 3 weeks of visiting the garage had given her more reference points. She'd learned the car's proportions through repeated observation, and it showed. The headlights were right. The stance was right. "That's very good," Elena said. "I'm still working on the floor," Lily said, pointing to the lower portion of the drawing where the reflected light had defeated her so far. "The shiny part is hard." "I imagine it is." Marcus had set down his magnifying glass. He was watching Elena without appearing to. She walked to where he was sitting and looked at the photograph on the tablet. "What are you looking at?" she said. "Carburetor mounting bracket," he said. The original factory spec had a different torque sequence than the service manual. "I'm trying to confirm it from the photograph." "Why does the sequence matter?" "Because if you torque the wrong bolt first, it introduces a micro stress in the casting that won't fail for years, but it will fail." He looked at her, which is also how a lot of organizational problems work. She looked at him with the expression she used when she was deciding whether to pursue something or file it. She filed it. "The acquisition inquiry went away," she said. "The legal team confirmed this morning that Renner's contacts have withdrawn the interest." That was fast. When you remove the reason for the acquisition, the interest tends to dissolve. She paused. It was never really about the company. It was about buying it cheaply. Once it became clear that the demonstration had succeeded and the partnership was intact, the leverage disappeared. "And Renner? Being dealt with appropriately," she said. "I'm told the process will take some months." Marcus nodded. Lily had been listening with the transparent attentiveness of a child who is trying not to be noticed listening. She looked back down at her drawing when her father's eyes moved in her direction. Elena looked at the Testarossa for a moment. "My father drove this car 4 times, she said. "He thought it was too beautiful to use." "I know," Marcus said. She looked at him. "You found the documentation," he said. "In the archive." "The technical addendum." "Yes. Your father bought that collection in '94. I cataloged it when I joined the Heritage Program. The Testarossa addendum was the strangest thing in it, this undocumented modification to a subset of vehicles, written in a mix of languages by someone who clearly knew the car better than anyone, and also knew no one would ever read what they'd written. And you remembered it." "I remember everything I've read about the cars I've worked on," he said. "It's not remarkable. It's just how it works." She looked at him again. The look had the quality of someone arriving at something they've been circling for a while. "Thank you," she said, "for coming back. For the second time, and the third time, and the time you decided to keep looking when you could have stopped." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Someone built something worth building," he said, "and someone else was trying to take it apart. That seemed worth addressing." "Is that all it was?" He looked at the car, at the photograph on the tablet, at the oil-dark space where the carburetor mounting bracket sat, properly torqued, holding everything in place. "The car is a good car," he said. "It deserves to run." Elena stood there for a moment more. Then she turned and looked at Lily's drawing, really looked at it. The way she'd looked at the first one in the garage 3 weeks ago. "Lily," she said, "would you like to see the full archive? We have factory photographs, original design drawings, things your father worked with." Lily looked up. She looked at her father. He was looking at Elena. "Yes," Lily said. "Please." The archive room on the 28th floor was kept at a regulated temperature and a specific humidity level that Gareth, the document services manager, had spent years perfecting. When he came in the following Tuesday to find Elena Ward, Marcus Hale, and a 7-year-old girl sitting at the archive table with the Modena documentation spread between them, the factory photographs, the technical addenda, the hand-drawn sketches from the original design process, his face made a brief journey through several expressions before settling on something dignified. He left them to it. Lily sat between her father and Elena Ward, her colored pencils arranged in a careful row in front of her, working from a factory photograph of the Testarossa that was 40 years old and showed the car in profile on a test track in Maranello, morning light low across the bodywork. She was trying to get the reflected light right. "Look at how the shadow falls under the sill," Marcus said, pointing. "It's not dark. It's just a slightly different temperature." Lily tilted her head. She picked up a pencil. Elena watched. She was learning, she realized. Not about cars she'd grown up in rooms where cars were discussed and documented and treated as objects of serious attention, but about something else. The specific gravity of someone who does what they do because the thing itself matters, not because of what it returns. She'd been in rooms full of people like that her whole life. Her father had been one. She hadn't expected to find another one in the parking garage, in a work jacket with a grease stain on the cuff. With a 7-year-old girl in a yellow raincoat, Lily made a mark on her drawing. She looked at the photograph. She made another mark. "Better?" Marcus asked. "I think so," Lily said. "Can you see it?" He looked at the drawing. He looked at the photograph. "Yes," he said. "I can see it." Outside the archive room window, the city did what cities do: moved, breathed, carried its weight of ordinary days. Down in the garage on the executive level, the Testarossa sat in its bay, properly grounded, properly calibrated, running on the torque sequence that had been right all along, waiting with the patience of something built well enough to last. The engine was quiet now, but it would start.